the most common questions I get is, should I buy a Western knife or should I buy a Japanese knife? So this is my advice at the most basic level. Let's start with the Western knife, the German knife, the European, the French. This knife. The main defining factor of quality of knife is determined by the Rockwell hardness scale, which is a unit of measure that determines the hardness of the metal. Traditionally, German knives are made with a softer metal. What that basically means for you is the edge will not last as long as a Japanese knife, so it will go dull faster. Another feature is the roundness, the curve of the knife. So this curve of the knife matters because traditionally French chefs, they like to cut things with the rock and roll method like this, which is why there's a curve to these knives. I've been seeing a lot less, but my main tip is don't get a knife with a bolster. This bolster sucks, just gets in the way of sharpening. German knives are generally heavier just because these knives are made with a full tang, which means the metal actually runs all the way through the entire handle of the knife, making it a lot heavier. Those are the basics for a German knife. German knives are great, very, very durable because of the soft metal. Knives will last you a very, very long time as long as you take care of them. For beginners and you're not looking to sharpen your knife that often, I would recommend a Western style knife. Moving on. So the Japanese knife, the thing that makes Japanese knives that much better than Western style knives is the type of metal that it's used to make and also the forging process. So with Japanese knives, the forging process is actually done by hand by a blacksmith. Long story short, in the samurai era, there'd be blacksmiths that make their samurai swords, and after all of the samurai had kind of like disappeared, the blacksmiths took up making cutlery. Through their cutlery, they started making knives. So Japanese knives are actually forged the same way and with the same techniques used when making samurai swords. But anyway, the reason why you want to buy a Japanese knife is because of the Rockwell hardness. It's made up of a harder metal, which that means for you is that the edge will last longer, meaning it'll stay sharper longer. Another thing is Japanese knives are lighter because they're generally thinner. Not all of them, but most of them are generally thinner, making them lighter. Instead of a full tang like a Western knife, they call this a partial tang, so the piece of metal that's connected to the blade itself goes about this far. They take the handle and hammer the handle on, actually makes the knife a lot lighter. My preference, I actually like a lighter knife that can cut sharper. Japanese knives don't come with any bolsters, which is a plus. The handles on Japanese knives can be customized, so you can actually take this handle off and put on a cool looking new one if you want. This is a Japanese knife that actually has the shape of a French knife with the curve because I actually prefer the rock and roll method, this method. But traditionally, Japanese knives were made completely straight. No curve, they're made completely straight, which means that the cutting technique then turns into a push cut, which means you push forward and cut like this, right? So the knife actually lifts off of the cutting board as opposed to the rock and roll method where the knife is actually in constant contact with the board. So I actually prefer the curve on the knife, but that's a traditional feature for Japanese knives. The ultimate question is whether or not to buy a Japanese knife or a Western knife. Both knives are great. They will do the exact same thing. They will cut your food just fine. This one will stay sharper longer. This one is going to get dull faster. For a beginner, everyday use, Western is probably more reasonable. They're going to be cheaper and they're going to be a lot more durable. Japanese knives are kind of like fancy cars or fancy anything because they require more maintenance, but in my opinion they can perform a lot better, meaning I can cut stuff faster and I can make things look nicer with my cuts. Also, the difference is Japanese knives are going to be really expensive. Just because they're hand forged and the type of metal is actually more expensive. If you're actually going to spend money on a Japanese knife, should probably invest in one of these. This is a sharpening stone. I sharpen my knives regularly, maybe once a month. So don't bother buying a Japanese knife unless you know how you're going to get it sharpened, because otherwise there's just no point. And that's the difference between a Western and Japanese knife at its most basic level, in my opinion. So I'm trying to experiment with different types of videos. This one is this or that. Different camera angle, different advice. Let me know how you feel about the style of the video, if you like it or not, in the comments below. If you like what I am saying, please give me a like, please give me a subscribe. The channel is all about being able to bring value to you so I can teach you things. So you ask me the questions and I will answer them for you. So I will see you next time. Bye!